The next 7 days were surreal. Nothing prepared us for the ground experience we were about to encounter. It was chaos, but we worked together to figure out the next best steps. Tens of thousands of people descended upon Abbey Gate. We were looking for anyone with a blue passport first and foremost. People were suffering from extreme malnutrition, dehydration, heat casualties, and infants were dying. Afghans were brutalized and tortured by the Taliban, flocked to us pleading for help. Some Afghans turned away from HKIA, tried to kill themselves on the razor wire in front of us that we used as a deterrent. They thought this was merciful compared to the Taliban torture that they faced. Countless Afghans were murdered by the Taliban 155 yards in front of our position, day and night. With only shipping containers between us, the Taliban would routinely murder people under our observation at their checkpoint. We communicated the atrocities to our chain of command and intel assets, but nothing came of it. The troops on the ground had to tirelessly work to control the crowds day and night.
Before he left office, President Donald Trump had negotiated the withdrawal of U.S. and NATO forces from Afghanistan. This withdrawal had a tentative timeline based upon certain conditions that had to be met by the Taliban. The withdrawal witnessed around the world was by any measure a complete disaster, although the Biden administration has touted that it was the most successful evacuation in history. But was it? Why did the Biden administration change airports from Bagram to Kabul, which was not secure? Why did the State Department not do their job around the clock, given the critical nature of the timeline, just as the military did? Why was there a total breakdown of military competence, communications, and command and control?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of the United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
The Biden administration's claims that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was successful flies in the face of facts and logic, and many Americans, NATO allies, and protected Afghans were left behind, while hundreds of unvetted and unqualified Afghans were extracted. It was expected that all U.S. military hardware would be removed from the country prior to a personnel extraction, with the primary exit location being Bagram Air Base, which was fortified and secured, allowing for total friendly control. However, under the Biden administration, Bagram Airport was abandoned, along with $80 billion in military hardware, and Kabul was the chosen location for the withdrawal, which was not a secure location and did not have the hardened defenses deemed necessary for proper security. It was also in the heart of Taliban-controlled territory. When Kabul fell on August 15th, thousands of desperate Afghans flooded to the airport, which was the only means of escape from the Taliban. Many of these were protected persons with guarantees of safe passage. The military dispatched 5,000 U.S. troops to assist in securing the airport during what became the largest non-combatant evacuation operation in the history of the American military. It was known through local and American intelligence sources that a threat was emerging among the Taliban in violation of the previous agreement. The reports and warnings were either downplayed or totally ignored, although covert and overt surveillance was ongoing. Those entities involved included the U.S. Army's 4th Psychological Warfare Detachment, Central Intelligence Assets, the State Department, and various soldiers and Marines. Some of the Marines on duty during the vetting and evacuation process included the 2nd Battalion 1st Marine Regiment Scout Snipers from Reaper 2, weapons company attached to Echo Company, 2nd Battalion 1st Marines. Surveillance had started on August 16th from a satellite tower, focusing upon known threats and possible threats at the Hamid Karzai Airport in Kabul, which was the new debarkation point for U.S. forces, civilians, and qualified Afghan nationals. The reports had been confirmed that a be on the lookout had been issued for 2 men, one clean-shaven man wearing a black vest accompanied by an older man. In addition, 2 suspected IED vehicles, a gold or white Toyota Corolla and a green Mazda convertible, were also objects of interest. From August 17th to 18th, the snipers were in their observation post, and the next day, 40 Marines in riot gear with sniper overwatch at the Abbey Gate were handling containment, as thousands of panicked Afghans tried to push their way into the compound. They were looking for those holding blue passports while watching for any suspicious activity. The State Department was responsible for handling the verification and processing of those attempting to evacuate, but they failed on every occasion, closing down in the late afternoon, failing to continue the process, leaving the Marines to hold back the crowds until the State Department resumed their jobs each following morning. The Marines had to escort Afghan civilians from the gate who did not have the proper paperwork, and they handed them over to the Taliban, who were inexplicably given the security detail along the airport perimeter, defying all logic. The Marines soon realized that these people were being murdered for just trying to leave. August 22nd provided a warning.
On August 22nd, an improvised explosive device, IED, probe took place down in the canal running along the perimeter of HKIA. This was ISIS, or the Taliban, performing an IED test run.
There was nothing they could do but report these events, and the State Department officials seemed to be less than interested in this clear violation of the agreement established between the Trump administration and the Taliban. Desperate parents handed their small children and infants over the walls and wire to at least save them from the mass murder they knew was to follow. The panic was evident. Marine Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews and his sniper team were informed as to the potential threats. They had the suspected suicide bomber in sight. They maintained acquisition as they radioed their request to take direct action to their battalion commander. Over the next few days, Sergeant Andrews and others repeatedly asked for permission to engage the known target, who was not confirmed, yet that request was repeatedly denied. A higher authority apparently did not have the authority required, and Andrews and his team were told to stand by.
I requested engagement authority while my team leader was ready on the M110 semi-automatic sniper system. The response, leadership did not have the engagement authority for us. Do not engage.
However, Reaper 2 was never contacted with an answer. To quote Laura Seligman of Politico, it was reported in August that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin had warned military commanders 24 hours before the attack to prepare for a mass casualty event at the airport, with Abbey Gate being the most likely target. But the commanders decided to keep the gate open and to allow British forces to continue evacuating people. On August 26, 2021, the suicide bomber, previously identified and previously in target acquisition, had been tracked, suddenly disappeared into the crowd. 11 Marines, 1 Navy corpsman, and an Army psychological operations soldier were killed by that suicide bomber who set off 20 pounds of military-grade explosives at the airport's Abbey Gate. The explosion launched numerous 5mm ball bearings and also killed 170 Afghans. Sergeant Andrews himself was severely wounded, laying among many others who were also wounded and killed. He is lucky to be alive. His brother Marines and Afghan civilians were less fortunate.
Then a flash and a massive wave of pressure. I'm thrown 12 feet onto the ground, but instantly knew what had happened. I opened my eyes to Marines dead or unconscious lying around me.
Should Sergeant Andrews have taken the shot without authorization? It is easy to say yes, unless you have been in a similar situation. If he had taken the shot, the political fallout for him personally could have been disastrous, but people would still be alive. We cannot fault Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews for following orders and waiting for engagement authority which never came. The blame is not with him or others on his team. The blame lies with a weakened military leadership more concerned with their futures and their political masters who were unqualified to be in control and undeserving to be leading such fine men and women. Sergeant Andrews gave testimony to Congress on March 8, 2023, explaining the failures from his vantage point. His viewpoint is the most important, as it was he who could have taken the shot and saved all those lives. Yet he was denied that opportunity to do so due to a political failure that took no responsibility and has only shown disdain for those who did their jobs. Andrews and his snipers were highly trained and conditioned to analyze and identify threats through target acquisition. His judgment should have been the deciding factor. As a result of the Biden administration's incompetent and disastrous exfiltration, many Afghans have been killed who should have been saved. Americans and our allies were left behind due to the lack of organization and communication. Those not killed immediately were hunted down, and some are still being hunted by the Taliban today to be killed for having worked with U.S. forces. The current administration does not care, for if they did, they would have authorized and supported rescue and recovery operations. The post-event investigation was a complete sham and cover-up. Army Brigadier General Lance Curtis, head of 3rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command, served as lead investigator. When a reporter asked Brigadier General Curtis if the attack could have been prevented given the resources and U.S. troops he had at the time, Curtis replied, "Based on our investigation at the tactical level, this was not preventable, and the leaders on the ground followed the proper measures. And any time there was an imminent threat warning, they followed the proper procedures. They lowered their profile, they sought cover, and at times they even ceased operations at the gate." This response is absolutely repulsive, as the opportunity to prevent the disaster could have been solved by one Marine with a clear line of sight on the primary threat. Failing to give him authorization resulted in the worst political decision of President Biden's presidency, and that is saying something. The Taliban was allowed to violate the previous agreement without response, with tragic results. Billions of dollars of armored vehicles, tanks, aircraft, and small arms were abandoned and left to our enemies. China has moved in and taken over Bagram Airport and the hardware left behind, and with the Taliban in a perfect position to sell the machines to hostile governments with the ability to reverse engineer our classified software and hardware. Under the Biden administration, the United States has proven that we are not dependable in our foreign policy positions, which can change drastically with a single election to the detriment of our allies and to the relief of our adversaries. We spent 20 years fighting on the home ground of terrorism. Given this disastrous campaign of failure, it would not be beyond imagination to see our sons and daughters return there in the future. It is said that elections have consequences. The catastrophe of Afghanistan, the emboldening of our enemies, the invasion of Ukraine, China threatening Taiwan, North Korea launching more missiles, the lack of stability in the world, among other issues such as the U.S. southern border, drug and human trafficking at record levels, losing 80,000 children to be trafficked, and a failing economy prove this to be very true.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please click like, subscribe, and share. Send us comments and show ideas, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.